a lot of the stuff that we feel in life in terms of our mental and physical barriers, how we feel in terms of illness, how we feel in terms of pain, is the story we tell ourselves. If a client came up to you and said, I'm struggling to lose weight because of my genetics, what in your mind do you think they are referring to?
When people are saying their genetics, they're either blaming it on their parents who may be overweight, but it's just kind of an automatic block that they're putting in the way of their progress. That they're not seeing progress and they may feel that they're doing everything right, but it's not working.
So if you feel good and you just struggle to lose weight, I would put money on the fact that this is an adherence issue more than it is a hormonal issue. So I'm feeling a little rusty here. We haven't done one in a few weeks, and life has changed. I've gotten older. I'm an old man now. I live in Surrey in the countryside. I'm married. I feel old. I feel really, really fucking old. And apologies for anyone watching on YouTube that's looking at like suitcases and shit and boxes from IKEA. This is still a work in progress office. It will be snazzy as fuck. But before we go on to our topic today, as I haven't seen you in a while, last time I saw you, you got COVID from a Scotsman in Edinburgh, and then you turned my wedding into a super spreader event because 4 people messaged me saying they got COVID after the wedding.
No.
So how are you? Are you feeling better? Are you good? How is Rob?
It's one of those things, right? I never want to be the type of person that, very relevant for this episode, that uses excuses. And every now and then you've just got to, life's already dictated what's going to happen. But straight away, I'm like, okay, when can I get to the gym? Can I still get out for walks? I've still got to eat healthy. I've still got to hydrate. Still got to hit all my vitamins. Did that influence my recovery? Well, of course it did. Of course it 100% did. And what I've been doing for the past however many years leading up to this point. I know people that drag it on a bit too much. I'm like, 6 weeks down the line, they're still talking about it. I'm like, really? But the biggest thing for me was the sudden lack of energy. That was the most surprising thing. Rest of the symptoms, not too long. That was the surprising thing. But I still got out for walks. I still tried getting in the gym. Okay, couldn't do as much. But then I also wonder how much of that was the reverse of the placebo effect, whatever the name of that is, where I'm like, well, I know my energy's low, and I'm going into the gym with a mindset of energy's going to be a bit low. It's probably not going to be the best session I want. Who knows, right? Who knows? But as far as I'm concerned, that's been and done with, over and done with. Got big, exciting things to come in the pipeline, which is going to be a very, very busy few months, but hopefully a very rewarding few months in terms of multiple different factors. And you never know, we might soon be doing this episode out of the soon-to-be open Performance House HQ with snazzy LED lighting in the back instead of empty San Pellegrino bottles in my clutch. Might look a little better. Yeah.
I think it's interesting you mentioned, I think, and it kind of lends us into the topic we're talking about today in terms of like the opposite of the placebo effect, making you think, oh, maybe I will feel like shit in the gym. So in turn, you felt like shit in the gym. Because I just got off a great webinar with Nick Daniel, who is one of the first guest speaker in the Coaching Confidence course. Anyone listening to this who doesn't know what Coaching Confidence is, it's the mentorship I run, and we're going to be getting a bunch of guest speakers on. So if you want to join, slots are open now. And if you want to just get the recording of Nick's webinar, we're also selling that as an add-on. So feel free to drop me a message on Instagram. But he said that injuries heal, pain is unlearned. And like a lot of the stuff that we feel in life in terms of our mental and physical barriers, how we feel in terms of illness, how we feel in terms of pain, is the story we tell ourselves. And I think today's episode is going to be this wonderful middle ground where we both go channel our inner Jordan Peterson and go into ownership and accountability, but also like allow people to have some excuses within reason. So we're going to talk the topic of genetics today. So before we go into it, before we like delve into our views, if a client came up to you and said, I'm struggling to lose weight because of my genetics. What, in your mind, do you think they are referring to? Not what you think genetics is, but what are they referring to?
And it's been said a million times. It's the second biggest excuse behind I've got an underactive thyroid, even though they've never had a thyroid test in their life. Because that's always my first thing. Oh, show me the results. Like, I'm genuinely interested. Show me the results. This is how we learn together. Oh, there are no results. I just know it. I just feel it. Okay. So when people are saying their genetics, they're either blaming it on their parents who may be overweight, but it's just kind of an automatic block that they're putting in the way of their progress. That they're not seeing progress, and they may feel that they're doing everything right, but it's not working. So there must be something else going on behind the scenes. It can't be the method. It can't be their adherence and their consistency. There must be something inside here. So it must be genetic. This might, maybe, like I say, whether their parents were overweight or not. Because I know people that have used a genetic excuse before, and their parents were lean, active, and absolutely fucking fine. So it's just this. People don't want to look deeper in the mirror and see what is actually going on. They think there must be some external influence, even if that external influence is an internal thing, by using their genetics as a. I don't want to keep using the word excuse today. What's another word we could use? Barrier. As their barrier.
Self-imposed barrier. I think it may be good to look at this in terms of, let's do the tough love part of this first. And let's talk about the reasons why your genetics are not to blame for your lack of results in the gym, both from a biological level, which I'll start with, and then you can chime in with the sort of the almost psychosocial sort of model of this. And then we'll come back round into the shit sandwich that is, well, let's look at what is actually genetics. That may make one person find it harder to lose weight than the other.
Yeah.
That is totally fair and totally legit. And then we can come to our conclusions. Because if I answered the question that I asked you then, what people are thinking about, I think the first thing that comes to my head is they're going to be blaming some form of hormone.
Yeah.
So, like you said, underactive thyroid. And they're going to blame insulin resistance. Or I've got diabetes in my family. And the first thing I will always say is that, well, do you have diabetes now? Like, if unless it's type 1 diabetes, this is in a way learned behavior. This is, you cause the type 2 diabetes. You can break that chain if you mentally allow yourself to be different from the people that have come before you. But I always look at the analogy I always use when I look at hormones, which kind of boo-hoos this genetics argument from a hormonal perspective, is that I imagine a race car going around a track. And if that race car sort of runs out of petrol, it doesn't immediately just go stop and you crash land round a corner, right? It'll gradually slow down over time as that petrol run out. And you wouldn't just experience the car coming to a halt. You would hear a splutter. You would hear like some signs that the engine's going out of way. There'd be other symptoms. And then when I see a lot of people using the hormonal excuse of like, well, my thyroid is low, for example, as the genetic reason why they're not losing weight, I'll go, okay, so your energy must be terrible. No, my energy's fine. And your performance in the gym must be through the floor. No, I'm hitting PBs. Oh, okay. And you're cold, right? Cold hands, feet, and, generally struggle to warm up body temperature. No, I'm totally fine. So what you're saying is your thyroid that does all these jobs is sort of like it controls our cells and revs up how much, these cells are working. It's picking and choosing which cells it wants to work on. It's just going to halt the fat loss thing. But the rest of the stuff, we'll let them live that way. It's just the fat loss stuff. And that's the stuff when it looks at this, like hormones don't crash overnight. And you will see signs that are happening. So if you feel good and you just struggle to lose weight, I would put money on the fact that this is an adherence issue more than it is a hormonal issue.
An adherence issue with quality of what you're doing behind it as well. I mean, you might be adherent with your macros. If those macros are shit quality, then of course your energy's going to fucking suffer. Like, how many people eventually end up going off of it if it fits your macro style diets? Because they feel like shit. Of course you feel like shit. Your carbs for the last 2 months has been nothing but Pop-Tarts, crisps, and whatever else you tried to squeeze in. because it hit your fucking target, you know? So, but again, that comes down to adherence. Like no decent coach that I know is throwing those sort of things out there that you can eat what you want within these macro numbers and still lose good amounts of body fat and stay energetic and hit PBs in the gym and have a decent amount of progress. There are some lesser coaches out there saying you can still lose weight eating all the foods that you love. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But if your energy is super flipping low, then you should know it's because, well, you have shit input, you get shit output. So if you're feeding yourself shit or not a lot of stuff at all, then of course your overall energy is going to be terrible. But that doesn't mean, like you say, doesn't mean things are crashing overnight. Like the body whispers before it roars, right? So you're going to have little things going on. Just your energy being low doesn't mean that everything suddenly crashed. It's just maybe the first warning sign that you're not feeding your body enough. Your body will then adapt and you suddenly feel great again, and then it's going to come back to bite you on the ass. But there's always these little signals here and there. And that's why it's important to track what you're doing, whether that is through the use of a spreadsheet or an app or a Whoop strap or things like that. I'm not saying everyone needs to invest into tech, but taking stock of how you feel on a daily and weekly basis, the warning signs are there if something is going wrong. But we're too easily distracted, too much else going on, or we don't have enough skin in the game to even care about doing that unless there's a particular goal.
And that's the key. That's the key thing, as coaches will say as well, right? They'll get these clients who'll go, "I think it's a genetics issue. I think it's a hormonal issue," and they go, "Okay, so tell me what you're doing." Well, I eat clean, and they'll say things like, "I eat clean," or they you'll see things, and this for the coaches. This I know that's a lot of my audience. You'll see things like when you get them to track that. If you get them to track their macros, it will go 70, 70, 70, 70, 70, 70. You see me? You never went 1 gram of fat over or under. Or like 12,000 steps where like, okay, so you're on 11,999, one step away from bed, and you jumped in for your final step. You know, you'll see missing days on the weekend with big weight bumps on a Monday. You know, like these things are signs that your client's not tracking any data, so they're making this assumption that something outside of their control is to blame because it's much easier than admitting that they're a failure, which then I would argue they're not, by the way, and we'll come on to why I don't think they are a failure. I think the only way you can actually fail is by giving up on something. If you give up and say it's your genetics, that's when you become a failure. If you go, oh, maybe it's my genetics, let's double down and find out and keep trying and finding a solution, and you find the reason, which may or may not be your genetics, right? I think if coaches will start to look at, okay, what are the signs that maybe my client is either not taking the data, which means they haven't got a clue, or two, rushing this process. So they are tracking their data, but they're sort of only half-ass tracking their data. You know, and I want to almost double back to your point earlier on as well about like the quality of nutrition, because I think this is something that every coach now talks about: progressive overload and calories in versus calories out. And I bang on about this a lot. I think we spoke about this on the previous episodes. But people don't know what goes into calories in versus calories out. It's just, you know, moving and eating. When like, well, if your ATP production is poor, you can't run the Krebs cycle. If if there are issues with hormones, which that might not be genetics, this might be like lifestyle induced issues, right? That could be solved very, very quickly. These things are going to bring your BMR levels down. But again, you could say that it's your genetics, or you can say, well, I put myself in a position where my maintenance calories is lower. So either I have to bring my calories lower to adjust for this new thing, or solve that issue so I can bring my caloric ceiling up. Again, there's an element of personal responsibility that's lacking when genetics becomes the excuse rather than a puzzle to work out.
Yeah. It's like, if you think, stupid analogy, but if you think like you're living in Storm County, hurricanes every flipping year, right? A matey next door bought a house that already had like basement, protected roofing, sound structures, and it never gets really affected except for maybe the glass blows out or something like that. And you bought a shack that is terrible, and you know it's not sound structure, and every single year you've got to redo it again and again and again, but you just build it exactly to how it was. It's got to come a point where you go, no, I need to build a bigger, stronger thing here something that is actually going to weather this storm. Okay, matey next door bought it all automatically, but it doesn't mean you're stuck with your lot. You do the best with the best you can with the tools you got. And there are, as we'll get onto, some things that you have inherited. It doesn't mean a death sentence. It doesn't mean never actually making progress or being able to achieve those goals. It just means you might have a trickier ride than the person who's not inherited that gene variation. But we look for that. I don't know why we do it. Because we do it to ourselves. It's a self-talk problem. We look for that thing and go, that's the reason why I can't do this. Okay, there we go. There's my flag. There's my badge. I can't lose weight because, look at me, read my badge. That's why. Why? Why aren't you looking at, right, okay, this is something that is going to make it a tougher journey for me. So how do I work around this? How do I work with this? How do I still get the things that I want to achieve, experience, whatever the hell it is, even though this thing is going on? I don't think you had Tyler on. You haven't had Tyler on, have you? Tyler Saunders.
No, I haven't. No.
So disabled athlete, disability advocate, plays wheelchair basketball for England, is an absolute fitness beast, does all sorts of things, does high rocks, everything. Born without one leg, born without a leg, right? But yet he's never let that hold him back. He did the fan dance with me. He's done all sorts of stuff with me. He's incredible, right? You cannot stop the geezer. At no point will you hear him say, can't do that, got one leg. At no point. And that's a big life-changing thing. That's a very, very different experience to someone else who might go, oh, I've got slightly underactive thyroid. The geezer's shredded because he gets out and does his activity, commits to his training, commits to his nutrition. But he's also just a normal guy, as he will say. Like, people do overindulge a little bit in the inspiration, and I'm not taking anything away from him. He's a massively inspirational geezer. But to him, this is just his life. This is what he was dealt, but he still made it work. Still in phenomenal fitness shape. Puts most people to shame. Health is impeccable because he's consistent and he's adherent, but he also has the same life experience as everyone else, that life gets in the way. Sometimes you haven't got the full energy to give it the best session in the gym. Sometimes you want to eat some shit or go out for a night drinking, and that's going to affect your energy for the next day and things like that. It's a normal guy, but you don't see him when I say disability advocate, it means he's waving the flag to show the people that you can still do, even though something massive that would be holding you back. How many people, if you said to them, right, we're going to take off your leg tomorrow, would think that's the end of their life? And okay, it's a very, very different experience from what you've had. But imagine if that was your experience from the very, very start, you would make it work, right?
I think the big thing with this is that people are they're beating themselves up, they're getting frustrated, and it's easier to say that this is the thing that's wrong with me than to admit that you're struggling. And I can understand that, and I can empathize that. But I think it's big to come. The biggest lesson that people can take away from this, if before we go into working around some of the struggles that you have to help you, is that I think this is all underpinned with having good expectation management, whether that's a coach to clients or whether that's you to yourself. In that,
100%.
What is your why in this? And is your why big enough? And I'm not just going to be like, 'cause people talk about the why all the time, and they're like, well, you got to find a why. Well, maybe you don't have one, and maybe you come to the realization, do you know what? I like beers with the boys and a few beers and having a softer stomach. But I care about abs. It's a nice to have. It's not a need to have. And if you can start looking at this and going, right, maybe the reason why I'm not doing these things is because I actually don't care as much as I thought I did. And that is fine. We can find something else to train with. We can just work on keeping you healthy. But I think people beat themselves up and feel miserable because their actions aren't aligning with the ideals. And we've done is social media comparison ruining your lifestyle, or the last episode we did.
Yeah.
But is that's affecting where they are right now. And I think you've got to come to that point before we go into any of this stuff that may help you. Come to the point, it's like, what do you actually want in this? And if you like, no one in real life really says that everyone has to be bone dry shredded. Like, I've gotten shredded. I don't live shredded. Why? Because I don't live like some of the bodybuilders I used to work with. And no judgment to these people. You know, Cameron Young, who I used to work with, right, is an IFBB pro, absolutely incredible woman. I don't want to live like her. But she wants to live like her. If I beat myself up and go, why am I not living the life that Cameron's leading? I would be very unnecessarily pursuing a goal that I don't actually want to achieve. It wouldn't make me happy in the first place. So it's understanding before we go into the struggles. And if you're someone listening to this who isn't a coach, that is wanting, you saw the title on YouTube and goes, yeah, my genetics, are they to blame? And you got to this point in the podcast, like, understand two things. One, are you really wanting this? And if you come to the conclusion of yes, then right, let's assume you have dealt the worst hand, right? You're born without a thyroid. Well, you die, but let's just hypothetically say you're born without a thyroid. You can't lose weight. You've got candida. You've got everything wrong with you. You've got one femur that's 7'4" and one femur that's 1'9". And let's say you're really dealt a shit hand. I feel for you. Yes, genetics are making this harder, but you've got two options. What are you going to do about it? Because if you want to lose weight, you're going to have to find a route. So you either, in the most tough love way, suck it up and find a strategy and accept, okay, rather than saying, well, Dave down the road had it easy. Well, who gives a fuck about Dave down the road? You've got to do something about it, or you're going to stay out of shape for the rest of your life. And if you're okay with that, great. But if you're not okay with that, then we have to do something about this. We have to work with your genetics, not against them. It's not, as you said, it's not a death sentence.
No, never a death sentence. I'm training a young girl now. Everyone should follow her Instagram page. She's incredible. It's Miracle for Maddie. Maddie with 2 D's and 1 I. Miracle for Maddie. It's 22. When she was 14, they discovered that she had a faulty gene, and it's called SPG15. And basically what's happening is she's losing the use of certain muscles in her limbs, right? So she has to walk with a stick. There's certain spasticity type symptoms going on there. There's certain paraplegic type symptoms going on there, and it's going to just keep chomping away at her. But certain UK medical institutions said, just go home and make her comfortable. What, at 14? You having a laugh? Mum took absolute ownership of this, absolute controlled the situation, and has done what she can for her over the last few years, which includes research, fundraising, all sorts of stuff. She trains with me now just to get her legs and her limbs strong. It's mainly machine stuff. She's progressing. She can't do a lot of outside activities. She can't do a ton of walking because it's difficult for her. But she's doing something. It puts, we'll use that word again, it puts all our excuses to shame, because it just shows anyone can do something. Unlikely she's going to go run a marathon. It's unlikely she's going to progressively overload and lift PBs and things like that. But she's doing something that makes her life easier to deal with, that extends the quality and quantity of her life as well.
Or at least delays the inevitable. Right? Whilst it gives us some breathing room, some chance for the research to catch up to the treatment, things like that. Who knows? Miracles could happen, right? So it's all come from a faulty gene. It's something she inherited that just didn't express itself in her parents or grandparents or anything like that. But the gene's been detected as faulty, so it was inherited. So we could use that as an excuse. Well, she can't do this because of her genetics, but she's doing. She's absolutely doing. And again, like, she can't do a ton of activity outside. She eats ridiculously healthy, but there's some excess weight on her that she says she wants to lose. And the first thing is, let's just get her strong. Let's see how this works for an extended period of time alongside the other treatments that she's getting. She continues to eat healthily. She's going to fuel her body good food. She's not going to be putting on excessive amounts of weight because you're not eating too much. But when it comes to the point that she needs to lose weight, okay, then we'll look a little bit deeper at her food because she's limited with her activity. There's always something, right? Always. So why look at anything, whether diagnosed or not? Why look at anything as some death sentence? Like you said it, you opened the podcast with it. How many female clients I've had that when it gets to either a plateau or even when they've come to me and they've not been able to lose weight before, that say, I think it's my hormones. Well, there's over 50 of them in your body. Which ones? Because it's not going to be all of them. Which hormones do you think it is? And what are you going, again, goes back to the thing, and what are you going to do about it?
Maybe
it is. And, you know, I and it's not just it's not just clients, it's coaches.
It's
I see coaches going,
as well.
they stopped losing weight this week, so it's cortisol, or it's their thyroid, or it's insulin. All right, in a week, since last week when they were progressing really well, like it's. I think coaches with coaches, and this is a call out moment for the coaches. Listen to this. It's an element of you are too scared to have the difficult conversation. The people that blame hormones I'm not saying hormones are a factor. The people that blame hormones too frequently are often the same people that will, when a client's not being adherent to their diet, will go, they wouldn't lie to me. I promise you they're honest.
Yeah.
And they're not getting food pictures, and they're not double checking, and they're not looking at the tracker and seeing the round numbers, so seeing the missed days and seeing the missed snacks, and they're not asking these questions. It's like the same, like those coaches are doing, they will blame a client that will say, I eat clean, and go, well, you're not tracking your calories, so how do you know if you're in a calorie deficit? And yet they're not looking at the data enough and going, no, they're 100% being honest. Like, have you watched the show Secret Eaters on Channel 4?
Oh, yeah. Sometime ago,
Amazon Prime now, and I want to go back and watch it.
I might have to say again.
For people that haven't watched Secret Eaters, and I'm sure we've spoken about it before, it's a TV show where they have people that blame their genetics come on the TV show, and they go, I only eat 1,500 calories and I can't lose weight. I'm like a 120 kilo guy. And they will film them. They will rummage through their bins. They will film them on their commute. They'll film them at work. And at the end of the week, they will put two sort of like Henry VIII style dinner tables. One with the calories they thought they eat and one with the calories they actually ate. And you'll be amazed. And what's amazing about this show for people who think it's just people lying to coaches, the amount of things that are both conscious and subconscious. So you've got conscious things that your clients will not remit from food diaries. And that is about guilt. So if you just told your clients off every time they eat something off plan, are you making it easier or harder for them to stick to the plan? Because now they're not going to stop eating that food. They're just not going to tell you next time they ate it because you made them feel like a failure for doing so. So when you're working with people and looking at food pictures, the aim is to look for accuracy over perfection. So things I've seen on a food diet, right? And I'm sure you can throw some more into the list in a second. I have seen 1 ounce of steak. Like, who eats 1 ounce of steak, right? I've seen 1/3 of a glass of wine. And again, so my feedback there isn't, what are you doing eating wine? That's not in the meal plan. My feedback there is, hey, you only had 1/3 of a glass? No, I had 2 glasses. Okay, next time you have wine, can you just make sure you put how much you actually had so we know? I'm not demonizing the food, I'm demonizing the accuracy. Because then we might find that we can fit some wine in their plan and the diet is easier. We're so pushed for optimal, we actually go, well, maybe we're making this harder than it needs to be. I've seen people emit over 1,000 calories worth of sauce a day. I've seen people emit drinks. I've seen someone send me a picture of 800 grams of protein in a meal, and what he actually sent me was a plate of chicken on a scale that was 800 grams. So not only was he weighing the chicken and not just the protein in the chicken, he was weighing the plate. My God. When we look at these things and we go, oh, our clients are just lying to us, not necessarily. It could be subconscious. They could be unaware of this stuff. It could be midnight snacking. They get up in the night and eat something. It could be they've got a bag of nuts on the desk and they don't realize how many handfuls they had, and they go, probably 5 nuts. I've seen 11.5 cashews once on a meal plan. 11.5. Did you break a cashew nut in half? And when you see this, it's not to bash your clients and say that all of your clients are lying to. For people who aren't coaches, it's not saying you are lying to yourself. But what I am saying is that there is a variance of about 20%, 20 to 40% off that everybody is, including registered dietitians. Me and you, who've been in this industry for a while, are probably going to be about 20% off on their food diaries. Beginners are probably going to be close to 40, 50% off on their food diaries. All well-meaning, well-intentioned. We want to add into this that food labels can be off 10 to 20% by law. So when we know that our caloric intake is an exact science, now we can start to go, well, what actually can we do to allow some true consistency? Whether that is working on the things that make people, which we'll go into in a second, eat more food, or whether that's making them aware of the extra food they're eating and find ways of taking better data or ways of planning their days to make them more consistent.
Mm.
Is there anything else that you've seen? What have you seen on food diaries that maybe that people might be go, oh shit, I'm doing that, or coach go, oh, I have not asked that.
I remember this poor guy when I first started coaching nutrition with people with this boot camp I was running. This poor guy came to me and he needed to put on weight. And I was like, right, just keep me a food diary for a week, right? For a week. And he comes back and his food diary was literally rice pudding. 3 times a day, rice and milk that he would cook up into rice pudding. I was like, this is like, I don't believe you, but this ain't right. Like, this isn't healthy. This is, borderline eating disorder. And he said, what do you think I should do then? Should I add some more to it? I was like, fuck yes, add some more to it. And he went like, what do you mean? Like, should I grill up some tomatoes? And at one point, at one end of the spectrum, geezer might have a bit of some issues there, maybe a bit of an eating disorder as well, or he just has zero education whatsoever. But what it eventually turned out to be, because I was like, how's this geezer not dead? He's just living off of rice pudding. That's essentially baby food. What it later turned out to be later down the line is that was the only thing he was remembering to track when it came to it. That he wasn't tracking his food as he went. So of course he was eating more than that because he was slightly out of shape anyway. Things that I saw in our previous incarnation, someone tracked. Someone asked, oh, she was amazing. This shut me up so easily. She tracked a ton of mayo, like mayo with almost every meal, and I'm going, this isn't essential, right? Really, like this is calories you could probably save. And she said, but you told me that olive oil's okay and eggs are okay to eat. I was like, yeah, they are. And she went, well, that's what mayo is. It's just eggs and olive oil. I was like, fuck, she's got a point. I can't say shit. I can't say nothing to her. But it was the excessive calories that I was like, that's the first place we could probably lose some calories because it's, it's just going on food you didn't need it to go on. But mate, I always say this to every single one of my clients at the start is, I don't care if it's what you would class as a good food, a clean food, a dirty food, a bad food, whatever. As long as it's tracked. If you add alcohol, we can track that. You either had pint. If you had wine, it was either a 175 milliliter glass or a 200 whatever millimeter glass. We can work with that. I don't care if you went to Five Guys. Let's just put what we can in there so we have the data that is leading to the expression of your progress on the scale. So I'll never demonize her, but if we notice that we're not making progress at the rate we want to, then there's a reason why. And 9 times out of 10, 9.9 times out of 10, it's what's hidden in that food diary that's either in the food diary or not in the food diary. That 0.1 out of time is potentially your genetics or your hormones or whatever else is going on. But it's rarely the dominating factor in your progress.
When we teach in the mentorship, we teach literally an order of system. When you go through a check-in, right? What is the order of you're going to look at your data to get to that point? And it goes through all the things it's more likely before we actually start looking at issues. And then we arm people with tools to go, right, if they're saying it's a thyroid issue, here's what else you'd see. If you're seeing a blood sugar issue, here's what else you'd see. So you can actually start to piece together your data and go, okay, this is actually making sense. Let's look further into this sort of stuff. And you mentioned alcohol there because the weekend is that really key time that the people that come to you, coaches, I'm not saying you specifically, but coaches and go, I didn't track the weekend because I didn't know how. And the people that don't know how to track the weekends and express that same thing but have given it a go, I guarantee you the people that gave it a go, despite being a bit anxious about it, are the people that probably normally on the whole eat better on the weekends anyway. The people that go out and eat Five Guys and go out on a bender and have loads of food and a 3 a.m. kebab are the people that go, sorry, I didn't track Saturday, Sunday because I didn't know how to. What they're really saying is not that they didn't know how to track, it's because they didn't want to own up to themselves of what they're eating. So they will then go, I eat clean. It must be my thyroid. When they're looking at their Monday, Friday, they're not looking at the spontaneous things which they're not tracking. They look back at what they remember, not at what they choose to omit. And that is the biggest difference. I will, before we go on to some of the things because I think we've gone very tough lovey for the first half an hour. And I think I want to go into some of the things that I think are generally are genetics that coaches maybe are giving people an overly hard time on. But before that, I want to kind of go into a little bit about if you, like we said at the start, if your hormones are the issue, you want to see the tests. And let's say you get tested and there is issues in some way, shape, or form, but you are now medicated with that issue. Now, we have, on the whole, if you have, and we'll use thyroid as an example here, but insert hormone issue that you might have. We'll see people say that coaches that will go, well, you have a thyroid issue, but you've got thyroxine. So you don't have a thyroid issue anymore. So you still should be losing weight. So bullshit. And that could be legitimate, but I think that's unfair. And I think you should be looking at some of the symptoms. So if you're somebody, or you're somebody who coaches somebody that is now on thyroid medication, in particular thyroxine, yet their clients are still not losing weight and still having all the symptoms of low thyroid, you might want to look at this a little bit deeper. So what I would recommend people doing is making sure you know what tests you should be getting. Using thyroid as an example, right? So our brain and our hypothalamus show the HPT axis. Hypothalamus will speak to the pituitary. The pituitary will then release thyroid stimulating hormone. And then that will create mainly T4. So a little bit of T3, but mainly T4, which is an inactive form of thyroid. T4 is what is also called thyroxine. So the doctor, if you have low thyroid symptoms, will generally prescribe you T4 because it's a little bit less dangerous to do so. But that is this inactive form of thyroid. That will now need to be converted into the active form of T3. There is also a process in order for when thyroid increases to get the cells what they need in oversimplistic terms. And then there'll be another thing called reverse T3, which will say, well, okay, we've produced too much. We'll convert the rest into reverse T3 to make sure that we're not overproducing this. And then we have this feedback loop of like, nope, we're good now. We can bring thyroid levels down and it should come back up. Like a perfect, nice little loop. Now, sometimes doctors will look at this as, okay, we'll give it thyroxine. But what if it's not a production issue? What if it's not the brain not producing that hormone? What if your problem is you're not converting T4 into T3? So now you're producing more thyroxine, and then you're just creating more of a backlog. You haven't cleared the lines of traffic after the traffic accident. You've just put more cars in the traffic jam. So you're not freeing up the traffic anymore. So in that person might need something like T3, which obviously is a big commitment and something you should speak to your doctor about, and you shouldn't be offering this to your clients. But it's something to go, okay, could you get T4, T3, thyroid stimulating hormone, and reverse T3 on a blood test so you can see where the actual issue is? And then at least your doctor is armed with the information to make a better choice. It could be an over-conversion into reverse T3. Right? And we can take this model and we can put this into any other hormone, right? Is the problem that our body isn't producing insulin like a type 1 diabetic? Or is it like type 2 diabetes, where we're in insulin resistance, where that insulin isn't getting into the cell? So when you're looking at that as an example, if someone has blood sugar issues, this is something that you might want to go to a doctor with and go, right, if they've got high HbA1c as well as fasting glucose, right? The two show different things. HbA1c shows the prolonged exposure to insulin as opposed to where your glucose is right now in space. And then the doctor maybe can look at things like metformin, which I don't think is always a great drug, but could be the option for someone like this, or insulin if it's gotten really bad. But what could you do? Well, if you know the issue is now not getting into the cells rather than a production issue, well, then weight training is going to be something you would want to, not that you wouldn't anyway, but prescribe to that client, because GLUT4 will allow you without insulin to get glucose into the cells. You could look at things like berberine that could help get glucose into the cells. If you're looking at thyroid, you could look at things like iodine, B vitamins, zinc, all support thyroid health. So again, I'm not expecting everyone to understand what I have just said, but the point I am making is that it's, again, going back to that, it's not a death sentence. If you get the right information, you might find there's another avenue to go. So that you might have an issue that makes it harder than somebody else. The question is, what are you going to do about it?
That's the thing, right? This is part of the issue I have with the soon-to-be readily available prescriptions of TRT. it's just done on a simple finger prick test, which has, you know, certain degrees of accuracy. But the problem is, then you look at, okay, so someone's got low T, so the next option, therefore, should be lifestyle before any sort of prescription, should be. And if you're going on a prescription and not fixing the lifestyle issues, you're a moron and you're wasting your money. But we've also got to look at, like you said, with thyroid, there's precursors going on here. It might not just be a production issue, it might not just be a synthesis issue, it could be a transport issue, it could be a elimination issue. There's several different parts of this whole cycle where there could be an issue, and you've got to find it if you want to use that as a reason as to why you're not be achieving whatever goal it is. It might be you're not producing enough testosterone because of a hypogonadism issue. It might be the transportation issue. It might be that you're not getting enough of the precursor hormones to begin with, in which case the issue is not down here, it might be up here. There's so many different areas to look if you're willing to look and if you've got the budget to look as well. Some of these extra tests are expensive. And that's why some of these companies just give you the smaller test because it's cheaper to get you into doing it, right? The DHEA test is fucking expensive. So that's why most places aren't offering it, right? But even then, I wouldn't, hopefully, even though some have incredible knowledge, I wouldn't be going to my PT coach for advanced endocrinology assistance.
And they should be giving it.
And they shouldn't fucking be giving it.
So you, like coaches here should have places they go to, whether it's simply Medichecks or whether it's an endocrinologist they work closely with, to do this testing and give the actual advice. And then you should be looking at as well, how do I support and not make worse these issues? So for a lot of these are going to be stress related, right? So if I create more stress and I'm overdoing this HPA axis, I'm going to cause more inflammation, and this can impact many hormones. Now, what could you do? Well, you can make sure nutrition matches training. You can make sure they're not overtrained. You can make sure they're well recovered. You can make sure that they have the nutrients in their diet to support the pathways. So what a coach should do with his knowledge, if he has this knowledge of pathways and hormone pathways, is not prescribe TRT or tell them to put them on the doctor for TRT. Even if they need it, that's like, you go and speak to your doctor and see if that's an option. Even if you think they need it, if you're saying this to your client, what you're really saying is, I'd like them to get jacked because now they're on testosterone.
Yeah.
Whereas rather than saying, right, okay, well, what can I do to support this? Like, what are the nutrients there? If someone no one's going to have any harm by supplementing iodine, but it could support the thyroid. The B vitamins can support that. You know, like there's these things that could help that are in your scope of practice without overstepping and trying to be an endocrinologist, which coaches should not be.
Let's not forget the building blocks of all these hormones through nutrition, lifestyle, supplementation have no side effect, zero side effect. Whereas as soon as you start taking anything exogenously, okay, the effects might be amplified, but the side effects are amplified with that as well.
And if you're taking something exogenously, let me try and say that word right, why would our body produce it? Whatever the opposite of insogenously. Is that a word? I don't know.
It is now. It
is now. But this is the thing, right? So, you know, the side effects will ramp up. We might not produce it anymore. It is a big commitment to go on.
So that's then a entirely different lifestyle choice. If you want to go on TRT, chances are you might be on that for life, unless you've got an amazing endocrinologist who can get you to the right level, re-stimulate your natural production the right way, and take you off it whilst testing the entire time. And that's a rare occurrence in this country, certainly. And I could give you links to ones I know are the case. But that's a lifestyle choice. So is eating right and exercising and getting outside and focusing on your sleep and limiting your alcohol take. That's a lifestyle choice as well. Why, with, again, zero, only upsides. Why wouldn't you choose that route as well? Because it's the one with slightly harder work in it. But there's also less chance of things going wrong, and it's going to be so much easier in the long run to maintain. I don't get it. But yeah.
So going into some of the stuff now that are genetic differences that make someone find it easier or harder to lose weight. There aren't hormones. There aren't big bones. whatever that actually means, are, with our higher set points because my parents are overweight. We'll take it in turns and we'll discuss a point. Do you want to start? Like, what is something that people don't consider, coaches or people, that makes someone harder than the other to lose weight? That is genuine psychosocial genetics.
So there are genuine, real, researched genes that you could inherit that dictate. I mean, as we should point out for anyone who really doesn't actually understand what these genes are, gene is just like a code, and that code unlocks something later down the line. Whether that's, we'll just keep it in the realms of hormones anyway, right? But obviously your genes have way more important roles than just hormone release. Your genes, as a quick side note, your genes can influence your hormones, but your hormones can also influence your genes. It's all one big cycle. So to ever use the fact of, well, I've got this, therefore I can't. No, it's never really the case. It's never that black and white. Again, that thing you can't do here, you can influence the things that influence this, and it goes right back on itself. So we can potentially inherit a lot of genes from our parents and beyond that can lead to certain gene expression or codes being released and programmed throughout your body. But it's on a much smaller scale in terms of effect than people are willing to realize. So you will inherit genes. Of course you do. They don't just come out of nowhere. You don't get a new set of genes every single person is born. Of course we are inheriting. But in terms of what is actually switched on and has effect throughout our body, it's pretty goddamn small.
And I would argue there on that point that genetic limitations are more a factor in hypertrophy than they are in fat loss. If you're using genetics as a reason why you can't look like Chris Bumstead, I would say, all right, yeah, I don't have the genetics to look like Chris Bumstead, and I never will. That is it's not even a self-imposed limitation. That's a legitimate limitation. I will never look like Chris Bumstead. But it doesn't mean I can't look better than where I am now. The vocation, like we said before, with comparison, is not fixated on the Chris Bumsteads in the world. However, with fat loss, I think everybody can get lean. And I'm going to preface this. I'm going to come back to things that I generally think are genetical differences that make it harder for one person than the other. I'm not making the argument all of the same 24 hours in a day. We do not have the all same 24 hours in a day. We all have different barriers and struggles. And some people are more predispositioned through, when I say genetics here, when I'm going into this path of genetics, I'm not purely meaning who your parents are. I'm meaning how you've been brought up that potentially differ your experience with fat loss to somebody else. Why someone stays lean whilst eating whatever they want and why someone doesn't. People go, oh, girls do this a lot. Guys do it too, but girls do this a lot. Oh, well, Jane or Holly over there eats whatever she wants and she doesn't gain weight, but I gain weight. It must be a genetic factor given to my parents. I would say yes and no, because that genetic thing might not be that you have a gene expression different to Jane or Holly. What it might mean is that I'll throw Holly in there as a term, right? Holly taps her foot more. Holly has a higher NEAT input. Holly likes vegetables. Holly played netball from the age of 4. You got for your 3rd birthday, you got an N64, right? And you grew up in a place that had 7 million takeaways. And Holly grew up in a place that she had to cook her own food because it was about a 6-mile drive to the nearest restaurant. Holly likes vegetables. You think they're horrible, right? These things, while the path is going to be the same if both of these people want to lose weight, Holly's going to find this easier because she's been brought up to enjoy the things that get her there. She enjoys the process rather than the destination. The other person needs to find ways to enjoy that process. And that is a barrier that she has to overcome before she can even start to really make some headway. And I think this is the thing that most coaches do not think about.
Yeah, of course. The whole, it comes down to environment, right? External and internal environment. So like you said, I forget which name is which, but whichever lady was training for a very early age and enjoys the vegetables, things like that. And like you said, enjoys the process more than the outcome. already has a long history of the process. Someone who's maybe inherited a different gene expression, maybe not. Someone who lived in an environment where they had easy access to junk food and they didn't need to go outside and play and they were given the iPad straight away. They've never had the process. They've never had the experience of the process. So that's the first thing to learn. Take away any gene expression or childhood environment, the process is not there yet that would allow the body to start fueling more energy and producing the right hormones and dropping fat to begin with. So that's the hurdle. The hurdle isn't any gene or the fact that your parents overfed you, whatever. The hurdle is you've never taken step one. So there's nothing stopping you taking step one. There's nothing stopping you. So
I think, yeah, I think it's a
let's
learned.
take step one, you know?
Yeah, and I think genetics, like it's learned genetics and ingrained habits
Yeah.
are more the differences. And and again, we're going to come to the same place of personal responsibility to get you moving there.
Yeah.
However, it is not a fair playing field. Like, if you are that person who got an N64 and grew up on computer games and your parents never really did anything, they just stayed at home and they fed you microwave meals for all of your life, right? You're going to be in a position where maybe you're in a worse health position. You're going to a position where maybe you don't know how to cook. You go for convenience food, right? You don't understand exercise. You're not good at it. You've never enjoyed it, right? And these are things that you can't be helped. So while I believe in the personal responsibility argument, I also think we are, as an industry, we are too quick to call people out for laziness. Well, it's like, well, two people are coming from a completely different starting point. And like for somebody who grew up, like I just mentioned, to get to the point where they're doing 10,000 steps a day, eating 3 square meals, cooking, they might be more overweight, but they are far less lazy than the person that's been brought up to enjoy that stuff, because they've had to expel no extra energy, mental or physical, to do that. Whereas this person's had to change their whole life around. And, you know, like, for example, right, I sit in the middle of, even as a personal trainer, I sit in the middle of the road of physique. I'm not overly big, I'm not small. I'm not shredded most of the time, and I'm not fat. Like, I'm a bit more out of shape than I should be maybe as a PT right now. Okay, let's look at this. So we don't rise to our goals, we fall to the level of our habits. So let's look at my habits. Like, and my mum will listen to this, and I'm not calling her out for being a bad parent, not at all. My parents own pubs. So my thing, I quite like walking. That's an advantage I have. Tick, because we used to walk out to pubs. But I drank a bit of alcohol and some pork scratch and some crisps. So I'm used to a snacky type behavior of, I'll eat some food, right? I don't cook much. My dad was always a really good cook. I never did it much. And as an only child, I was never forced to as much. Okay, cool. So I don't cook as much. So I'm more prone to go and get a Deliveroo than I am to cook my home cooked meal. I don't prioritize that time in the same way. That doesn't compute in the same way. It's just something I just do. So I also grew up as a very fussy eater. I didn't like sauces for a while, what I do now, but I didn't like vegetables. Still don't, really. But I'd eat them sometimes, not as much as I should, because I know of the benefits to them. But that is that for me to eat as much vegetables as I should is a hurdle, because I don't like them, and I have to almost convince myself of the benefit to eat more of them. So it's probably the reason why I don't slam the carnivore diet like other people, is because I actually sound in a way, part of it's quite appealing to me. I can be I can get all nutrient without having to eat these things I don't like. Whereas somebody might go, I fucking love vegetables. Well, that person has an easier advantage than I do. And the person that's shredded year round, maybe the person that did 3 sports. I used to have a guy called Jordan Brooks who I played rugby with, shredded all the time. He played basketball in the spring, rugby in the winter, cricket in the summer, right? His parents were naturally skinny. So that's a mixture of gene expression, genetics, in terms of, like, he's been given a good hand, maybe in terms of slightly higher metabolic rate. And his parents are both very active. So we assume that activity was pushed into him as a kid. His sister is a, county very high level cricketer, and also played 5 or 6 different sports, and is also in fantastic shape. So now we're looking at this thing of, like, well, you've got good parents from a genetic standpoint, and you've been brought up in this way. And I would argue the latter has had more of an impact on his consistent ability to stay in shape than the former, even though the former still helps.
Massively so. Massively. And this is the issue with comparing ourselves to other people. So I have a client that references his friend all the time who is shredded all year round, literally all year round, but eats almost whatever the hell he wants. So when he sees him on a night out, he's eating whatever the hell he wants. They go for burgers, he has dessert, he has the lot. 3-course meals, doesn't matter. But he's still shredded year round. But what you don't see is that he's very consistent, probably, with his protein throughout the day. Clean eating, breakfast, lunch, maybe even a bit of fasting in there, probably a ton of veg. He also goes for runs, 10K runs, first thing in the morning, multiple times a week. We're talking like 4 to 5. He trains in the gym, heavy weights, resistance training, occasionally does HIIT classes as well. And at the weekend, he's playing at least 2 different sports because he loves physical activity. His activity output for the week is huge to the point where he can justifiably fill that gap with food. So when you see him on a night out and he's eating 3-course meals and what have you, well, of course it's going down because the guy's already burned it off because his activity is that high. That is not a lifestyle everyone can ever hope to achieve because it's almost a case of, well, the guy doesn't do much else because he loves and values this stuff so much anyway. That's the balance for him. So you can't compare yourself to anyone else. But it comes down to we're not really comparing gene environments. We're more comparing. This might change in the future. This might be a completely different podcast in 100 years when we're AI, when we're talking about it. Now then we can go, oh yeah, of course it's your genes because look at what your parents and grandparents did. But if you're going to compare yourself to someone else, you've got to look at the environment that they were brought up in, that they've consistently kept themselves in, and what they're willing to do as well, because that's what dictates the result.
And comparing to what you can do, because in the same way that the approach that got him there, how many of your office worker clients have the time to play 2 different sports on the weekend and run 10K in the morning and get up and move around during the day and resistance train? Like he's got a life that is conducive to doing that activity and that output. And how many people have families where, do you know what, their priority in life is spending time with their family? Now, this may or may not mean you have to set up a different expectation to weight loss. This may be look, my family and my job are more important than my abs. And again, going back to my earlier point, that's cool. Or maybe you just need a different approach to get you to that same end goal. But the thing I really liked what you said there is what you don't see. Because when we do compare ourselves to people who are eating whatever they want, or we see people online at coaches and we go, my client had 800 grams of carbs a day. And they go, okay, that's still taking work. Anyone's eating 800 grams of carbs in a day, and I've done this. Knows that takes work to get in a position where your body can handle this. However, the people I know that eat 300, 400, 500 grams of carbs a day and lose weight are the people that are so amazingly consistent in the early going that allows them to get healthy. They're the people that not hiding the food on their food diaries. They're the people not missing the weekend calories. The people are not having those cookies and forgetting about tracking them. They're not the people who eat the roast pudding 3 times a day and forgets the rest. They are the people who are so amazingly consistent that they don't have any extra calories on those times, which means they probably, if they're in a deficit, have a bit of a stockpile of food that they can have on a Saturday. And they're healthier, like we spoke about earlier on from hormonal fit, because they're consistent the rest of the week. They can get away with a little bit more junk than the person that has it every single day. We have this, I think, and this brings us back into the bigger picture, I think, where I actually think now, I saw a video from Sean Baker, the carnivore doctor, and he showed a video in New York in the 1930s where no one was out of shape. Right, and we can, and his argument was the food we are told by the health professionals is good today. We should not be all eating meat and carnivore and all things. I'm not saying he's wrong. What I am saying, I think there's more to that difference between New York today and New York in the 1930s, in the sense that they had to walk everywhere. There wasn't really takeout food. Like they all had home cooked food. There was not much processing. There wasn't as many additives. So I think today I can totally empathize with someone struggling to lose weight because we are now, I think, and I feel this as a coach. I feel that lifestyle today, even me who understands this and can do it, I'm fighting more of an uphill battle than I was 10 years ago.
Mm.
And we have now built our life around comfort. I can get an Uber. I can get an Amazon order to here. I can get a lift down the stairs rather than go walking down the stairs. I have all these things that mean I have to do less movement, even to the stupid things like desk setups. People modify their desk setups where they save a tap, they save a hand movement. Like, it's not much, but that's a few calories. And you add that up over the day, like how many calories we're expending less per day from these small movements we've eliminated for convenience and ease. That, yes, it's harder to lose weight now than it was. Now we look at supermarkets and we go in and chocolate is around the counter to tempt us. And we open our phone and we get every cuisine in the world. I have total empathy with people why they're struggling, because it is a harder environment now than it has ever been. Right? But I think as coaches, our aims are all, how do we work with that environment to help people? And I had Tobias Young from Tobias Lifestyle. He's changed his business name now, and I can't. Apologies, Toby, if you listen to this. I forgot your new rebranding. But he had a great story he said on the podcast was, so he had this woman who one of her biggest vices was she had this habit of drinking over a bottle of wine a night. So we think of what 600 calories or so, right? Extra on top of what she was probably else was eating. So this is the biggest barrier. Now most people say, don't drink the wine. Whereas Toby went, what makes you order the wine?
Mm.
And she goes, I get an email for my wine of the month club once a month. So he said, okay, I'm not saying you can't have wine, but what I want you to do is I want you to unsubscribe from that email. She unsubscribed from the email. She now not get the reminders, so she didn't buy the wine, so the wine wasn't there, so she didn't drink the wine. Whenever you look at habits, there is a cue, there is a routine, and there is a reward. Her cue was the email, the routine was drinking the wine, the reward was drinking the wine, the routine was the wine being ordered and delivered to her house. So now what do we do? How do we break that pattern? We can get rid of the cue. Now, for me, I had a similar thing where I used to buy, there was a shop around Maida Vale where I used to buy, there was 2 Quest bars for $5, so I had to buy 6 Quest bars every day. Because of course you did. Right? You see an offer. You go yam. So I came out of Maida Vale Station. Instead of turning left to that shop, I turned right. So now the queue was different. So I didn't get that queue of going into the shop. My routine changed, which means there was a new reward of maybe coming back home a little bit more fresher and more relaxed because I took a longer route home and got some steps up. So, like, again, I know a lot of it is just like, oh, ownership. But what are you going to do about it? But like, this is what I want to end the show on. It's almost like, well, what are the things we can piece together? How could we help your life or your clients' lives in a like, well, what can we do to change your environment, to make your environment more conducive? Because it's environment that causes many of these genetic issues. It is I don't like veg. I'm not used to activity. I don't like the gym. So like, I've got a few of these, but I've rambled on for a little bit. So like, if you had a client like that, like, what would you do? What ways you would make someone's life easier that you are empathetic with their struggles and working with them rather than saying, get on with it, calorie deficit, progressive overload?
It's awareness of habits, environment, and routine. It always is. Like, as a super quick caveat, just because I had this stat and it blew my mind. For those who think they are doomed to their genetic, what's the word? What's the scary word I'm trying to lose? Demise, apocalypse, whatever the fuck. Who think that I am obese, I am overweight, or I will be because of my genes. There is a gene, it's called MC4R, which is the most related to the stimulated appetite. So if you have this faulty gene expression, then it might increase your appetite and therefore you might be obese. But in terms of the studied people who have found to have diminished function of this gene that are cast as obese is less than 5% of obese people. Now, that doesn't mean 5%, that doesn't mean 4%, that doesn't mean 3%. It means categorically less than 5%. So some people it will be 0.25% of a certain demographical population. Some people it'll be 2%. Some people it's just less than 5%. So in terms of those who are classed as obese, less than 5% have this diminished function of this particular gene, and therefore they have stimulated appetite. For the rest of us, for the over 95%, it is, like you said, you've chosen this way to walk from the train station to your office that goes past Pret, that goes past Greg's, that goes past wherever, that you could actually go a slightly different way, and therefore that advertising is not even influencing you. I had a young lady, I never got to work with her myself. She was friends of clients that she drunk 2 litres of Coke every single day, regular Coke, 790 calories in one bottle, and she drank 2 every single day. Morbidly obese, a lot of emotional issues going on in there. So again, like there's emotional issues as well. It's not just gene expression. My advice to them straight away was switch her onto Diet Coke or Coke Zero. To be fair, when this was, there wasn't Coke Zero. We switch her onto Diet Coke. And it's funny how we call it full fat Coke when there is no fat in there, but it can make you fat. It's funny that we do that.
That's such a good point though as well, right? Because now people are freaking out because of this very, very, very bogus, very questionable science, World Health Organization thing that Coke Zero is now worse than like full fat Coke. Let's just say it. And like, well, okay, 790 calories on a bottle. She has 2 liters. What's she at? 1,400 calories of Coca-Cola? Like, what's worse? Like, people are so preoccupied with optimal. Is Coke Zero the most healthy thing in the world? No. Also, aspartame is the most researched sweetener on the planet and has still not been shown to have any significant effects. Now, let's hypothetically say these things are true. Let's say that it can impair gut function and can cause some inflammation, that can cause some insulin issues, which I don't understand without sugar in it. But let's just say that's the case. It's lesser of 2 evils. It's like saying, and I'm going to rob from Nick Daniel's seminar here. It's like saying that we've now learned that someone's knee should go over the toe in a squat or a split squat. But instead of working where the client doesn't get pain and gradually increasing them, you just go, no, we're going to bring your knee to the front of the room. Yeah. I'm like, well, you're making this argument that Coke Zero is terrible. Well, it's better than the person that was on 2 liters of full sugar Coke. So how about we look at this as a spectrum? And how about we stop scaring people? Because all we're going to do now is more overwhelm people that could be making better choices in their life. And as he said, it's most this lifestyle factor. If you told her to switch that to water, that's too big of a leap.
Yeah.
But if you said, okay, we're going to switch to something that tastes almost the same, we've now saved her 1,400 calories. We've now put her in a better position with minimal changes to her lifestyle. And I think there's loads of things we can do about this, like your choice of higher carbs or fats. So, like as I'm studying more about nutrition, delivering it to my students, I have a new way of thinking about high carb versus high fat diets. Because a lot of people, they'll talk about a low fat or low carb diet as like, this is the problem with carbohydrates, or this is the problem with fats. And now I flip this. I'm not saying there's a problem with carbs. I'm not saying there's a problem with fats. What I'm saying is here are the benefits of carbs and here are the benefits of fats. And if I want more of one, that ergo means that low fat becomes the byproduct. So if someone's training, like your mate who's like training 5-6 days a week and doing 2 sports and running 10K, I might want to fuel that activity, which means he's not on a low fat diet, not because low fat is good, but because high carb is good for him. Yeah. And in the same way that somebody who's more chronically inflamed, has maybe a lot of processed food in their diet, is going to have more omega-6s and pro-inflammatory fats than anti-inflammatory omega-3s. And we want that to be a 2 to 4 to 1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3s. If he's like 20 to 1, then I'm going to need to add more olive oil, oily fish, fish oil, eggs. So in turn, my fats have to be high, which means my carbohydrates will have to be lower. It is not the carbs that were the problem. It's that, well, this is the remainder. And we can take that same approach to making someone's diet easier. Rather than going, carnivore is bad, or high carb is bad, or low carb is bad, or low fat is bad. So, well, if your client says, I like bacon, I like cheese, and they're 150 kilos, well, how about make allowances for some bacon and some cheese? And then, yes, the drawback is they will need to eat less carbohydrates. There is always a cost. You can't eat more of everything. But like find ways to fit the things that are the most important. In my onboarding questionnaire, I go, what foods do you like? What foods do you dislike? What foods can you not live without? And what are your vices? So because I can look at those, well, if I say can't live without and vices, the can't live without I put in. The vices, we can make a judgment call whether that is helping or hindering them with them. And these are some of the things. And I also want to go back to your point about that gene, because it's like, even if the people that don't have that gene, understand that hunger is a spectrum. Like I've seen people that get to 1,000. I'm one of these people, right? You can put me on 1,000 calories, and as long as you make me busy enough, I find dieting. Once I'm mentally into it, I find dieting relatively easy. Once I'm in the routine, and once I'm in the habit of like cooking my food and not being lazy and getting delivered and shit like that. So I've known other people. I put them in. If I put them in a 3-calorie deficit, they'd be starving. So,
yeah,
and that's just differences. And yes, I'm not going to sit there and go boo-hoo your genetic argument and go suck it up, buttercup. I'm going to be like, yeah, okay, this is an advantage I have that I don't get very hungry, right? And whereas somebody else might struggle with hunger a lot. Okay, so what are the strategies? How do we bulk up food volume? Maybe we supplement with fiber. And this is now where we look at, again, like insulin resistant, self-induced hormone issues. Let's look at leptin and ghrelin. I'm not going to go on to what leptin and ghrelin is. There's a great conversation about gossip thems we did in a previous episode. But if someone has leptin resistance because they're morbidly obese, well, people saying like the coaches are very quick. Coaches who have never struggled to lose weight in their life. Coaches who have grown up liking healthy food. Coaches who have grown up liking sport. Coaches who have grown up liking the gym. And when you throw out the term semaglutide, they go, oh, terrible idea. You shouldn't do it. You should just learn to like love training and beast mode and progressive overload and calorie deficit. I'm like, yeah, all right. Walk a mile in their shoes and tell me your diet is the same as theirs, because bullshit. And like when you look at this stuff, like I look at semaglutide, if someone's really struggling, it's on that spectrum where hunger is more of an issue for them than somebody else. Me talking about stress management, lifestyle, sleep, weight training, steps. Imagine if I locked you in your room now, right? And those San Pellegrino bottles are empty, and I lock you in there and I give you any food or any water, and you are ravenously hungry. And then I'm going to get onto a call with you, and I'm going to talk to you about the perfect training plan and why you should be doing it. Are you going to be listening to me? Or are you going to be thinking, I'm fucking starving, I'm fucking starving, fucking starving? So if you took semaglutide, and I'm not encouraging people to take semaglutide, because there are drawbacks, and also everything comes with a cost. If you took semaglutide and all of a sudden that hunger emotion disappeared, I could now start getting through to you because you're not preoccupied with that sensation on all these other things. And that is the stuff that people ignore. And I think we should have a little bit more with empathy. I call this, the coaches, assertive empathy. We should be more empathetic, but we should be assertive and not go, it's okay. It probably is your thyroid. Don't worry. We'll lose weight when we can. But on the flip side, on the other end of the spectrum, you shouldn't assume that all your clients live the same life as you and that their genetic issues aren't valid. Because as we've expressed today, everyone has massive, massive differences. We do not have the same 24 hours in a day.
No, done. And that's such a great way of putting it. But empathy is a word that gets bandied around with inaccurate connotations to it. And exactly like you said, we shouldn't be going, oh, well, oh, poor you, let's wrap you up in cotton wool. Let's not even try. That's not empathy. That's destructive empathy, if anything. And the way you put it there, assertive empathy, that's absolutely fantastic. Because everyone came from a different situation. Everyone. Okay, there are similarities between people's upbringings depending where you are in terms of demographic, in terms of your location, things like that. But everyone has a different start. Everyone has a different experience. Everyone has a different journey. That's what you have to take into account. That in itself is empathy. Looking at your client, going, right, this is what they've done so far. This is what they're looking to do. Everyone's going to have a slightly different method to follow. Whereas if we just look at it as, well, no point even trying, that's so destructive. And the problem is, that's the bigger message that's out there. Oh, you slipped off the wagon. Oh, you had a weekend where you didn't track and you had 20 pints and 2 kebabs and 3 pizzas and whatever. Oh, never mind. We'll start again Monday. You're doing your best. But everyone, that's the thing. Everyone is doing their best.
Big is beautiful.
Big is beautiful.
Like, I saw a video today about someone saying that bodybuilders, there should be a fat category, and that you having a like, we see it as glorifying when someone builds their body, but when someone gets big from eating a lot of food, then it's seen as bad, and that is just fatphobic. I'm like,
it's so bad.
There's delayed gratification here. You have not delayed. It's delayed gratification via instant gratification. That is the difference between those 250 kilo people.
Yeah,
you know, and it's like we are moving into a world, in my opinion, anyway, where we're becoming more victimhood, and it's, without going off on too much of a tangent, we'll do this another time, maybe, and maybe get an episode that divides opinion.
Yeah,
this is also my problem with modern cinema, where, especially in this empowering female role model, where a lot of the new characters, like if you look at Terminator 2 Judgment Day, Sarah Connor, right? Like, didn't outpower the men, but what she was fucking smarter. She was feisty. She was driven. She was resourceful. So it ended up being absolutely amazing. The original Mulan didn't outpower, failed, struggled, couldn't match up to our male counterparts, found ways to be smarter, found ways to push through. These are good, strong lessons for any gender. Whereas now our modern movies are a little bit like, you have all the tools already. And it's the world that is the problem for your circumstance. So you just need to fix the world. Oh, cool. Thanks. That's helpful. I just need to fix the entire world. Like, rather than taking it and looking in and go, do you know what? I am the reason my circumstances are the way they are. And I'm not saying that some people don't struggle for, I don't want to use the word patriarchy because that assumes male, societal reasons. But like, again, I'm going to bring it back into the topic that we are more and more encouraged. And again, this is a genetic difference in terms of environment. Someone that grew up today, we've spoken about the accessibility to food and the lack of more comfort. But in 1950, people grew up being told to suck it up. Now, I'm not saying that's right. I think there's a middle ground here. And I think that people should speak up and talk and be vulnerable. And I think that's great. But we're now going so far the other way, where people now are told that their circumstances are other people's fault, not theirs. So now we're going to have people that are going to find it even harder to lose weight because they've never, ever had to deal with hardship. And we can sit there and we can mock these people all we like. Or we can say, do you know what? If you were born in 2015, right, and you're 8 years old now, and you get to 25, right, I can sit there and go, man up. Right, or whatever phrase you want to use is politically correct or incorrect, or you could sit there and go, do you know what? You've had this, like, indoctrination, for use of a better term, and then for the whole of your life, and like, it's going to take some unlearning to take ownership, and it's not your fault. It's not. You've never ever opened your eyes to the fact that things could be your fault. We're quick to blame. I don't think it's their fault.
That's, like you said it perfectly there. The big message is that you are enough as you are. You've got all the tools that you need. But it's not a case at all. We're all doing the best we can with the tools that we've got at the time. So it doesn't mean what you've got right now is what you're stuck with forever. You can learn new skills. You can get new tools that will take you to a new experience, as long as you still try to do your best. So even someone who's doing horrible, this is a great way to shake off someone who's ruining your day as well. Well, it's doing their best with the tools they've got. They've just got shit tools. So we're never stuck. And again, your tools can be your genes, can be your hormones, can be the environment you were brought up in, can just be the media that you're consuming that affects your mood for that day. doesn't mean, again, it goes back to the start, doesn't mean that's your death sentence, doesn't mean that's it forever. So this empowering message shouldn't be, you're great as you are and you've got everything you need now. The empowering message should be, yeah, you're great now, but you could be greater. You could be even better. You could have a better experience.
And we don't even believe the zone hype. Like if generally if the message we're trying to portray to the youth today of you have all the tools you are, society knows the problem. Why do we have schools? Why do we have universities? Why do people start at entry levels in jobs? Why aren't people coming in as CEOs at 20? Well, because they don't have the skills. And I think it's actually an empowering lesson to be like, you know what? I don't know enough. Like the reason why I don't have a multi-million, six-figure business now, the reason why I don't have a multi-million pound business, I would much rather believe that it's because I don't have the tools, the understanding and the lessons that I can go and work hard and learn than thinking, well, it's because my parents weren't rich enough. Now, it doesn't mean that the people whose parents weren't rich enough don't have an advantage. This is a great parallel, actually, right? Money, right? The person, people believe the rags to rich story. People love, inspired by the rags to riches story because that person worked hard and came from modest beginnings to be where they are. People aren't inspired by the people who were born into a trust fund and made millions. And when you look at that, why aren't people inspired by these people? Because you need hardship to create a story and something that we can resonate with. Now, does that mean because I was born, I'll use me as an example rather than to call out any neighborhoods, because I was born in Wolverhampton and I was born in a nice part of the Midlands, right? So let's assume I was born in the middle of Wolverhampton in a hard area. Just because I was born in Wolverhampton, does that mean I can't make millions? No. Does that mean the person who was born even in my village at Sitch Lane, 2 roads up in Sitch Lane, right? They are £1 million houses, right? Did they have an advantage of making their business work? 100%. Of course they do. Does it mean I can't get there? No. Does that mean you should have empathy for the difference? No, you should. I'm not asking for empathy, but like we've got the tools we want. So you either are given the tools by a good hand, and then you have to learn the ones you don't have, or you have to learn all the tools. The path's the same. It just might be longer, it might be harder for one person, but the path is the same. So to close, I think this is a good closing point. If you had to give one, let's say, uplifting message for someone that's listening to this and they know now that, yeah, maybe my genetics are to blame, but I want to do something about it. What's your final closing message for them?
At the very least, there's more than enough studies done there on hundreds of thousands of people with diminished gene function that still saw a 27% increase in their fat loss from physical activity. So at the very least, just exercise. I don't care what it is, whether it's copious amounts of steps, whether it is running, whether it's sport related, whether it is getting in the gym and building muscle and getting stronger and whatever it is, physical activity is the number one non-negotiable. And it goes back to that New York video as well. That's the main reason. It's not necessarily the quality or type of food. It's more the physical activity that made sure that culture was not obese. No one's sitting in at the weekend watching Netflix. TVs didn't exist. So what are they doing? They're getting out of their house. They're not just sitting there. What do we do now? This is a bit weird. TVs haven't been invented. What should we do? They're already out.
That's the thing. Like, I haven't had Wi-Fi for last week, and I hated it. And I realized how reliant I am on Wi-Fi signal
Massively,
to run my life. And that is mental. I've sat today, like I've done something that no one would have done in the 1930s. I had a call at 10, a call at 11, and a call at 12:30. Right. So, so from 10 till 2:30, I have not moved.
Yeah.
Sat in this office, and that's just a difference of environment change.
Crazy, right?
I think if I had to give a bit of advice to people, we start to look at the things that we've spoken about that are genetic differences. There are genetic differences based on your environment. So if you're in an environment that makes you feel that, like, I can't do this, or it's just genetics, or my family don't cook, or things like this, where possible, change your environment and seek help. Now, I'm not
Yeah.
saying you have to invest in help, although that is the quickest way to get there. But if you can change your environment, join a club. There's nothing perfect. Get out this optimal mentality. Join a BJJ club. Join a CrossFit gym. Join a fun run community. Invest in a coach. Join the fast lane. Do something where there is a community of people that all of a sudden you go, this ain't a death sentence. Like, I love in-person business events. I went to the OTE event last summer. And I'll tell you what, one of the greatest things about what Adam's put together and many other business mentorships is you saw people that were making good money. And all of a sudden, it wasn't this big overwhelming thing that only these people with advantages can do. It's like these people that go, oh yeah, I grew up in St. Helens, mate, and an awful St. Helens accent, and I made loads of money. I'm like, oh, that's worse than Wolverhampton. He's doing 8K months. This person here has done this. This person here has done it. I went to Ollie Carson's event, right? And Ollie has two. His wife's dad owns the lot, and Ollie makes a lot of money. He has two. He's built. Well, not built. He's bought a semi-detached house, both of them, right? And then we see guys of all different backgrounds, all doing loads of different revenues a month, and they are normal. And I was in an environment in Hong Kong where no one really pushed the fitness industry. Really, change, come back. I'm like, oh my god, there's so much here. Yeah. And now I'm more driven, more motivated, more confident. So if I can give a message to you guys, whether you're struggling to lose weight or you're in a position where your clients aren't losing weight and you're feeling a rut, change your circumstances. Work for a company that will push you. Go out and find a place for people that have lost weight. And all of a sudden you realize, right, even if you have a genetic hand, even if you can't get to the peak, you can get closer than you would have done if you sat on your sofa feeling sorry for yourself. So, Rob, no matter how long it is between episodes, we can have a great episode with anything. So, if people want to learn more about you, tell us about, I presume, the Fast Lane, and tell us about Performance House. So
there's two places.
By the way. Sorry, but that was a fucking cool noise that you just made with your mouth at the start of that. I can't do that. It's like a pop without even a finger.
It must be genetic. It must be. So there's two projects I'm working on at the moment. The Fast Lane is going to not rebrand as such, but it's going to provide a slightly different service that I feel is going to cut through the noise of the only options men currently have to improve their hormones and their environments at the moment. But I've also jumped on board with a good friend of mine opening a gym in Richmond, which is going to provide one-to-one and online training services. And it'll be interesting for me to be getting sticking my teeth into a physical project, which I haven't done for a while. It's called the Performance House. You can find it online at Performance House LDN, the way the cool kids are spelling London nowadays. Or we just ran out of characters on Instagram, one of the two. So yeah, Performance House LDN, where you can see us build the gym, and we can go into it's a chance for me as well to go a bit deeper into the exercise around education that I've not been able to do in the gyms I've been training people out of so much. So I'm excited for that as well. But I would also say, in terms of exercise resources, you're the best. I'm not going to be going too deep on this stuff. If you really want to get the next level education out, go for Simon stuff, not mine. But in terms of the basic tools that people need, this is one of the things we want to do. We want to impact a local area, be in Richmond, and still continue to impact people further afield through online as well. Those are two places to go. Rob. Two projects.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. And for everyone else watching this, if you made it to this part in the show, please support the channel by liking, subscribing on YouTube, sharing on Instagram, Facebook. Literally tell your mum, tell your dad, tell your dog. The more people we can get this out to, the more guests we can get on, the bigger the show gets, the better the experience for you guys. So, mate, as always, been an absolute pleasure, and I'll catch you next week.
Back in the game.
Back in the game.